Welcome back to episode 17 of The Gray Files, where we peel back the layers of technology, economics, data science, and even the human condition itself, all in an effort to try and understand this vast and often perplexing world we live in. I'm your host, Erica Barker, and tonight we're concluding our 3-part series on the attention wars by examining the darkest chapter of all, how ordinary people like you and me are systematically transformed into ideological warriors, willing to sacrifice family, friends, and their own well-being for causes they may not consciously understand.
We're sorry. You have reached a number that has been disconnected or is no longer in service.
Your brother won't return your calls. Your sister blocks you online. And the reason isn't money, love, or old family drama. It's politics. But not politics as debate. Politics as identity, as religion, as infection. How far can these systems take you before you stop being yourself? Before you become something else? An instrument in someone else's war? And that is the question at the heart of tonight's episode. We've already seen how algorithms reel us in like fish on a line, and how psychological tricks can quietly rewire the way we think. Tonight, we go bigger. We step inside the factory where those tricks get industrialized and deployed at scale by politicians, media organizations, and networks that treat your mind as raw clay to be molded. And make no mistake, my friends, this isn't just Charlie and Rachel's story. It's yours. The same words, the same emotional triggers, the same invisible pressures that reprogrammed them are pressing against you right now. In every headline you read and every scroll you make. If that sounds abstract, it isn't. Charlie and Rachel Patterson are fictionalized composites that reflect a pattern many Americans are living right now. Tonight, we now find Charlie and Rachel Patterson at the end of their transformation. What they've become shows us the true cost of the attention wars. Part 1. The recruit becomes the recruiter. By 2023, something fundamental has shifted in how Charlie and Rachel related to politics. Charlie wasn't just watching conservative content anymore. He was actually making it. His YouTube channel, Real Talk from Real America, had 30,000 subscribers who tuned in each week to hear how liberal institutions had ripped his family apart. His trauma had been alchemized into a brand, a story repackaged as bait. Each video followed the same choreography. First, credibility through personal experience. I'm not some pundit. I'm a farmer who lost his sister to liberal brainwashing. Then, emotional connection through shared grievance. Maybe you've experienced something similar. Finally, the ideological frame. This is what happens when woke ideology infiltrates families. None of this was deliberate. Charlie wasn't reading propaganda manuals. He had unconsciously absorbed the same persuasion techniques once used on him: social proof, fear association, cognitive closure, and was now deploying them against his own audience. Rachel's journey ran the same rails in the opposite direction. Her podcast, Resistance Stories, reframed her pain into progressive ammunition. The twins weren't just consumers anymore. They were distributors. The manipulated had become the manipulators, and their personal suffering had been turned into a weapon pointed at society itself. Part 2. The Language Virus. To understand how manipulation scales, we have to examine how language itself becomes a weapon. So back in the 1990s, political consultant Frank Luntz pioneered what he called language engineering, testing phrases to see which words shifted public opinion. A tax increase became revenue enhancement. Government spending became investment in America's future. The policy didn't change, but the framing determined whether people cheered or recoiled. Today, Luntz's methods have been supercharged by artificial intelligence and oceans of social media data. Algorithms now test thousands of variations in real time across millions of users, discovering which words spark rage, loyalty, or fear in different psychological profiles. The result is what researchers call linguistic viruses, phrases designed not for truth, but for emotional punch and viral spread. Think of terms like woke ideology. Each is a capsule carrying assumptions, emotions, and behavioral cues that bypass rational thought and go straight to the gut. When Charlie said liberal brainwashing or Rachel warned about conservative extremism, they weren't just voicing opinions. They were spreading engineered phrases tested and refined in political laboratories before being injected to look grassroots. Part 3. The Emotional Hijack. The most advanced manipulations don't aim at reason at all. They hijack the brain's ancient emotional circuitry. Neuroscientists describe the triune brain, the reptilian base for survival, the limbic system for emotion and bonding, and the neocortex for reasoning and planning. Manipulators target the limbic system, our emotional switchboard, while suppressing the neocortex. Fear is the most reliable tool. Threaten someone's values, make the danger feel immediate, and the brain reroutes energy from analysis to quick defensive action. Loyalty spikes, nuance collapses, and the person clings to whoever promises safety. That's what happened to Charlie. Conservative content framed liberalism as a danger to rural life and family survival. His fear circuits lit up, his reasoning dimmed, and conservative became synonymous with safe. Rachel's feeds used identical triggers, only with progressive fears. The consequence was chronic, low-level fear. Their moods rose and fell with news cycles. Their sense of safety depended on constant confirmation that their side was winning, and their relationships, once rooted in family and care, were reframed through ideological lenses designed to keep them anxious and loyal. Part 4. The Tribe Machine. One of the most powerful manipulation techniques in politics takes advantage of something baked deep into human evolution: our desperate need to belong to a tribe. So for most of history, survival wasn't about being the smartest or the strongest. It was about sticking with a group that would hunt with you, fight with you, and help raise your kids. So our brains evolved to prioritize loyalty, to conform to group norms, and to treat outsiders with suspicion. Modern political organizations have learned to hack this instinct. They build artificial tribes, not around bloodlines or geography, but around ideology. They make political affiliation feel less like a matter of policy preference and more like the core of who you are. Charlie's feeds framed conservatism as proof of his authenticity as a rural American, loyalty to his ancestors, fidelity to tradition. Politics fused with identity until the two were indistinguishable. Rachel's feeds performed the same operation in progressive terms. Once identity fused with politics, tribal enforcement kicked in. Both twins consumed content that recast disagreement as betrayal, debate as warfare, and compromise as cowardice. Social media algorithms amplified this by building homophily networks, or echo chambers, where belonging, status, and meaning all came from political alignment. The result is what political scientists call affective polarization. Opponents stop being wrong and start being alien, dangerous, a threat to your way of life. That's what happened to Charlie and Rachel. They weren't engaged in democratic debate anymore. They weren't trading ideas. They were fighting tribal wars. And that's exactly how the system was designed to make them feel. Part 5. The Memory Wars. One of the most disturbing aspects of modern political manipulation is the way it rewrites our collective memory. Researchers call this historical reframing. Now here's the idea. If you can control how people remember the past, you don't need to work as hard to convince them about the present. By reshaping collective memory, political organizations change the baseline assumptions, the foundation people use to evaluate everything happening right now. They do this in a few key ways. First, historical cherry picking. That's when certain events get spotlighted while others quietly disappear, leaving only the evidence that supports today's agenda. Then there's the context stripping, taking events out of the messy situations they actually happened in, so they look clean and simple. Anachronistic interpretation is another favorite, slapping modern values onto eras where they don't belong, bending history to match current narratives. But the real powerhouse is repetitive narrative reinforcement. Tell a simplified version of history often enough, through enough different channels, and it becomes what people genuinely remember. Not just what they think, but what they believe they experienced. Charlie fell right into this trap. His worldview around a storyline that painted rural communities as perpetually virtuous and urban elites as perpetually corrupt. It left out the inconvenient parts of history, like the massive role government programs played in keeping rural economies alive. That didn't fit the narrative, so it vanished. Rachel's version wasn't any more accurate. She absorbed a storyline where progressive movements were always righteous and conservatives were always oppressive. That required minimizing the complexity of social movements and ignoring the fact that some conservative concerns came from real, legitimate fears. Psychologists call this motivated memory. You remember the past in ways that support what you already believe in the present. And the scariest part? Charlie and Rachel didn't just parrot these narratives. They genuinely believed them. They believed memories that contradicted their own lived experiences, and even statements they themselves had once made. By this point, the algorithms hadn't just rewritten their political beliefs, they had rewritten their relationship to history itself. And that made the twins, like millions of others, open targets for manipulation through false analogies, fake precedents, and entire storylines about the past that never actually happened. Part 6. The Addiction Economy. Modern political manipulation doesn't just change what people believe. It creates dependencies. It wires the brain so that targets don't just want political content. They crave it. The techniques are borrowed straight from casinos, video games, and social media apps. Behavioral economists call it intermittent variable reinforcement. So in plain English, that means unpredictable rewards. The kind that keep you hooked because you never know when the next hit is coming. Most political content is low-level stuff. Mild irritation here, a small sense of validation there. But every so often, a post hits like a jackpot. A story that makes you furious at the other side. A headline that makes you feel seen and validated. Or a meme that sparks either righteous hope or existential fear. Those moments trigger a dopamine release. And dopamine doesn't just feel good. It teaches your brain to come back for more. The cycle builds tolerance. After a while, mild outrage just won't cut it. Moderate positions start to feel bland. Compromise starts to look like betrayal. And nuanced analysis? Forget it. Who wants thoughtful complexity when you can mainline the emotional thrill of conflict? That's exactly where Charlie and Rachel ended up. Both of them became what researchers bluntly call political addicts. Their emotional balance depended on a steady drip of politically charged content. They checked their feeds compulsively, grew restless when they were disconnected, and even experienced withdrawal-like symptoms when forced to focus on normal, non-political parts of life. And the addiction wasn't to politics itself. It was to neurochemical rush, the dopamine spikes engineered by algorithms designed to hijack their brain's reward systems. So in other words, their political beliefs weren't just convictions anymore. They were cravings. Part 7. The Manufacturing Process. When you zoom out from the tricks and techniques, you see how they lock together into something much larger. A system. A machine. Modern political organizations run what can only be called ideology factories. Sophisticated operations that take ordinary citizens as raw material and output activists willing to sacrifice personal relationships for the cause. It begins with data. Every click, every like, every search leaves behind a breadcrumb trail revealing fears, insecurities, vulnerabilities. Artificial intelligence turns this into profiles so detailed they make therapists look like amateurs. From there, the system identifies exactly how to manipulate each individual. People under stress, lonely, broke, grieving, get drawn in with content that ties their private pain to political solutions. What feels like solidarity is really recruitment, delivered through trusted messengers, friends, family, influencers who sound like you. Once hooked, the content escalates, intensifying commitment while filtering out dissenting voices. Social media echo chambers do the rest. Soon, passive consumers turn into active agents, sharing, donating, showing up at rallies, recruiting others. Approval flows in when they engage, shame and exclusion when they don't. Eventually, the political identity fuses so tightly with personal identity that leaving it would feel like amputating part of yourself. Charlie and Rachel went through every stage: data collection, recruitment, conditioning, activation, and maintenance. And through it all, they never felt programmed. They felt like they were waking up, which is exactly how the system was designed to feel. Part 8. The Dark Psychology Arsenal. The techniques behind modern political manipulation don't just come from clever marketing departments. They draw on the darkest corners of psychological research. The kinds of studies once run by intelligence agencies, cult leaders, and totalitarian regimes desperate to control human behavior. During the Cold War, both the United States and the Soviet Union poured resources into this question. How far can you bend human consciousness before it breaks? The Americans had MK Ultra, a program that tested everything from LSD to sensory deprivation in the hope of dismantling and rebuilding human personalities. The Soviets ran their own experiments, blending psychology, propaganda, and surveillance. Most of the more extreme methods, like drug-induced hallucinations or electroshock, proved too messy for mass use. But the research revealed something critical. Consciousness isn't a fortress. It doesn't need to be smashed through with brute force. It's a fluid system. Redirect the flow gradually through environment, information, and reinforcement, and you can reshape it without the target ever realizing what's happening. Modern manipulation is built on that insight, with the methods refined for digital life. Physical isolation has become social isolation, with algorithms quietly engineering echo chambers that separate people from dissenting perspectives and supportive relationships outside their political tribe. Sensory deprivation has been swapped for cognitive overload. Instead of silence, it's a fire hose of emotionally charged political content, so much that the brain can't keep up, leaving it more open to suggestion. Chemical disorientation has been replaced with political anxiety and social media addiction, which disrupt sleep and wear down resistance. Exhausted brains are easier to influence. The threat of physical intimidation has morphed into authority pressure. Trusted media figures, politicians, influencers who command obedience without ever raising a fist. And old-school group coercion has been replaced with digital peer pressure, where conformity gets you likes, shares, and belonging, while dissent brings shame and exclusion. Put it all together, and what we have is the mass deployment of techniques once reserved for cults and authoritarian states, except now they're wrapped in the language of democracy. Millions of people are undergoing systematic psychological conditioning while believing they're simply participating in authentic political life. Part 9. The Weaponization of Loyalty. Maybe the most insidious trick in modern political manipulation is how it hijacks loyalty. Loyalty, of all things, one of humanity's most valuable traits, something that kept our ancestors alive and their families together, gets twisted into a weapon against our own well-being. Loyalty evolved as glue. It's what kept small groups cooperating when danger loomed. It's what built marriages, raised kids, and held cultures together across generations. At its best, loyalty is why people stand by each other through loss, hardship, and change. But political manipulators have figured out how to counterfeit that instinct. They engineer loyalty responses by blurring the lines between politics and family, between leaders and loved ones. Suddenly, a political leader isn't just a politician. They're one of us. Criticism of a policy feels like a personal insult. Defending an ideology feels like defending your children. Once loyalty is wired into politics, it becomes a trap. People stop updating their beliefs when new evidence appears, because changing your mind feels like betrayal. Debate isn't growth, it's treason. That's exactly what happened to Charlie. His loyalty to conservative politics fused so tightly with his identity as a rural American that questioning a Republican talking point felt like betraying himself. Rachel experienced the same thing on the progressive side. Criticizing liberal policies felt like abandoning her very commitment to justice. Both of them had been taught to see political flexibility as weakness and ideological consistency as virtue, even if that consistency ran directly against their own values or interest. And here is the heartbreaking part. The system worked because Charlie and Rachel's loyalty was real. Their genuine capacity for devotion, the same trait that made them good siblings, good friends, good neighbors, was redirected toward abstractions, toward party labels and ideological tribes. And once that happened, loyalty stopped binding them to people and started binding them to politics. The result? They became incapable of sustaining relationships with anyone who did not pass the same loyalty test. Part 10. The Human Cost and the Path Forward. As we come to a close on this 3-part series, we need to face the cost of modern information warfare. Not just what it did to Charlie and Rachel, but what it's doing to all of us. Their story isn't rare. It's the template. Families fractured, relationships broken, communities splintered. Not from honest disagreement, but from manipulation designed to erode the very cohesion democracy depends on. That's the hidden goal. Not winning elections, not passing policies, but destroying the social fabric. Because divided populations are controllable populations. If neighbors see each other as enemies, they won't solve problems together. If communities can't talk across differences, they can't resist exploitation. The manipulation industry has succeeded beyond its wildest ambitions. It's turned public discourse into a battlefield where the weapons are psychological and the casualties are trust, empathy, and shared reality. But the techniques aren't invincible. They only work because they exploit vulnerabilities we all share. And that means they can be resisted. Awareness is the first crack in the system. Diversity of perspective breaks the echo chamber. Regulating your own emotions slows the hijack. Real community creates belonging no algorithm can counterfeit. And purpose? Meaning rooted in something deeper than politics? Well, that keeps you from being captured at all. Most of all, we have to remember what Charlie and Rachel forgot. That love, connection, and understanding across differences are stronger than any system built to divide us. The attention wars are real. The manipulation is sophisticated. The stakes could not be higher. But we are not helpless. We are not powerless. And we are not alone. The choice is ours. The time is now.